Okay, welcome to our quick revision series, chapter 3. So, in this section, we're going to be looking at chapter 3, soil composition and agriculture and the environment. So, 3.1 has to do with soil composition. First, you need to be able to define the content. What is the soil? Now, first, you find out that the upper layer of the earth in which plants grow, a black or dark brown material typically consisted of a mixture of organic remains, clay, rock, and rock particles are usually referred to as soil. Now, soil has several importance, and the major importance of soil is that it serves as a medium for plant growth, and soil also helps to modify the atmosphere by emitting and absorbing gases such as nitrogen and carbon dioxide. Now, soil provide habitats for animals that live in the soil, major like earthworms. Now, you find out that soil absorb, hold, release, alter, and purify most of the water within the terrestrial ecosystem. Now, soil serve as an engineering media for construction, like houses, and soil act as a living filter to clean water, so it helps in water purification through infiltration. So now, the next thing we need to look at is the composition of soil. So quickly, composition of soil. Now, this is it. Soil is made up of mineral particle, organic content, and the organic content has to do with living plant and animal, microorganisms, and their dead remains. These are all, how will I call it, organic content, which add to become part of the soil. And also we have air and water. These are the three major component of soil. So we're going to look at how this individual component is distributed throughout the soil. So quickly, you find out that when you look at the based on volume and weight composition, the amount of organic matter in soil is just 5%, while air content in soil, it makes up 25%, water makes up 25%. So air and water makes up 50% of the soil. It's made up of air and water, 25% based on volume, while mineral matter makes up 45% of the soil. Now, you should know that soil is usually formed from rocks. So soil is formed from rocks. And remember, when we're looking at rocks, I say rock is an aggregate. Rocks is an aggregate of minerals. Aggregate of minerals. What that means is rock is a combination of minerals. So if the soil is made from when rocks are being weathered, eroded, and deposited over long period of time, you find out that the mineral component of the soil is usually higher than any other component that makes up the soil. Now, that's based on volume. Even when you look at that too, based on weight, you find out that based on weight, organic content is still the smallest, which contain the living matter, and it's just 3%, while the mineral matter based on weight makes up 85% of the soil. And when we talk about mineral matter here, we're talking about things like this nitrates, the potassiums, the sodiums, which are major components of the soil, the silicons. Now, look at soil based on particle size of soil. We look at sand, silt, clay. You find out that sandy soil or sand particles measure between 2 millimeters to 0.06 millimeters, and sand is the largest particle of soil. Then from there we move to silt. Silt particle is within the range of 0.06 millimeters to 0.002 millimeters, and silt particles are larger than clay particles but smaller than sand particles. Well, you find out that clay particles are just less than 0.002 millimeters. Now, clay is the smallest type of soil and it feels sticky when it is wet. So let's move to 3.2. 3.2 has to do with soil for plant growth. So the component that makes soil important for plant growth are also some of the major components of the soil itself. So for plants to grow, you need mineral content, and the mineral content forms the mineral ion component of the soil. Now, we found out that poor growth may be due to a deficiency in one or more minerals. Now, so yeah, we have series of minerals, and so nitrate, the major element that makes up nitrate is nitrogen, and nitrogen is a major component for proteins. So you find out that why is it needed? It's needed to manufacture protein. And what is the use of protein? Protein is used for cell growth and repair of worn out tissue. Now, nitrogen is needed to make amino acid, and amino acid is a major component for protein, and protein is broken down to amino acid, you remember. So phosphate, the major element is phosphorus, and phosphorus is needed for respiration because just as plants photosynthesize, they also respire. So plants photosynthesize, they also respire. That means they also make use of oxygen plus glucose to make carbon dioxide, water, and energy, because they need energy also for their own growth and development. And phosphorus is a major component of the DNA and also cell membranes. Then potassium compound, and a major element in potassium compound is potassium, and potassium is needed for both respiration and photosynthesis. So potassium is needed in enzymes uh, which are involved in respiration and photosynthesis. Then magnesium. Magnesium is a major component of the chlorophyll. So it's needed to make chlorophyll, and chlorophyll is the pigment in plants that help to trap sunlight for photosynthesis. So without magnesium, you find out that the plant will not be able to photosynthesize. Okay, so that's one. We've been able to look at soil as a medium for plant growth. So we've looked at mineral ions and the different minerals and some of their functions. The second content you need to look at is organic content. So soil organic matter is an extremely important component of the soil. Because they help to provide some organic nutrient that is needed for soil growth. And these are animal remains, plant remains that add manures to the soil and also improve plant growth. Then pH is also a component that affects soil growth. pH is the degree of acidity or alkalinity of the soil. So if the soil is quite acidic, there are certain plants that are adapted to acidic environment, while there are certain plants that are not adapted to acidic environment. So you need to test the soil to know the pH level, which is a scale that chemists use to measure the acidity. Based on that, you now know which type of crop plant will be suitable for that particular type of soil. Now, another major aspect that comes out a lot in your exam is for you to be able to differentiate between sandy soil and clay soil. So you look at their characteristics based on their component, and we'll now look at how each of these components brings, how we can use them to differentiate between these two major type of soil. Now, sandy soil and clay soil, looking at the air content, further that sandy soil has a larger particles than clay soil. So if it has larger particles than clay soil, you expect that the air spaces, if these are the particles of sandy soil, then there will be more air spaces for air to go through than clay soil that are quite very small. There are less air spaces in between. So air content, you find out that sandy soil have high content while clay soil have low content. In terms of water, water can easily infiltrate and percolate within sandy soil. So since it has so it will percolate and infiltrate and easily flow out. So you find out that sandy soils are usually very dry because they are not designed to hold as much water as clay soil. So you find out that the water content is low, but in clay soil the water content is high. Then in terms of drainage, this because of the larger size particles, you find out that it can easily drain quickly while clay soil drains slowly. In terms of cultivation, it is easy to cultivate on sandy soil than on clay soil. And in terms of humus, humus here can also be referred to as the organic content. So sandy soil is rich in organic content, while clay soil is poor in organic content or low. That is why sandy soil is good for cultivation than clay soil. Okay, let's move. Now let's look at agricultural types. Now, agricultural types. There are different types of agriculture, and these are grouped based on what products they farm and what they are farming for, and also look at the techniques using to increase agricultural yield. Now, what they farm, based on that, agriculture can be classified into three types based on what they farm. Arable farming simply means growing crops. Pastoral farming simply means rearing of livestock, that's animals, and mixed farming has to do with rearing livestock and growing crops on the same farm. So that's mixed farming. Then we also have why they are farming. Now people farm have commercial farming and subsistence farming. In commercial farming is where you grow majorly cash crop, and cash here simply means money. So when you grow crops that can easily be sold to make money and profit, grow crops or rear animals to make money. Then subsistence farming, this has to do with to produce is grown or animal are reared mainly for the farmer and the family to consume. So they are usually food crops to be eaten. Now, based on the input, also I've looked at based on why what the products they farm, based on why they are farming, and based on also input. Based on input, we can have intensive, intensive and extensive farming. Now, in intensive farming, what is done is you have low, okay, small piece of land. Let me use that word small. When you have a small piece of land, small piece of land, small piece of land for both high input. Now, when I mean input, I mean things like your fertilizers. In small piece, you can use high yield variety seeds. You have pesticides. Now, these are examples of input. Then, but for extensive farming is when you have a large piece of land but no input. Large piece of land but low input. So you can just take note of that. Then what are the techniques needed for that is used to increase agricultural yield? That means to increase agricultural yield or to increase food production. Now, some of them include crop rotation. Now, crop rotation is based on growing a series of different type of crops in the same area in sequential season. What this means is if I have this is a piece of land and let me have the same piece of land, sorry, and different year. Now, let's say this is year 1, this is year 2, and this is year 3. Same piece of land. And this year I decided to farm maize. This next year I decided to farm beans. And this next year I decided to farm yam. Now, this is crop rotation because you are not cultivating one single type of crop on this same piece of land, year in, year out. Now, the reason is that this year you plant maize, next year you plant beans, which is a leguminous crop. So, leguminous crops are actually rich in nitrogen, which once they decompose, sorry, nitrogen, they add nutrients and replenish the soil. Then the next year you farm something different. Now that's just the concept about it. And crop rotation also help in retaining the soil quality and thereby increasing food production and yield. So that's one. Let's look at the second method for increasing food production. Okay. Now, another method for increasing food production is use of fertilizers. Use of fertilizers. So fertilizers contain minerals. These fertilizers contain minerals such as nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, which help the plants to grow. Then irrigation also is very important. So by watering crops more frequently, it may be possible to grow crops over longer seasons. So during dry seasons that there is no longer rainfall, you can still cultivate. Grow for 2 seasons, or farmland that was previously too arid. In that process, there'll be longer growing seasons, so obviously more food will be produced. Now, when you have insect control, insect affect plant and thereby reduce food production. So things like insecticides can be used. But insecticides have a long-term impact on the environment. But also you can, in order to control insects, you can use either insecticides, or you can also carry out the process of cultural or biological control of insect. Then we have weed control. In the case of weed, you use a herbicide. And fungi control, you use a fungicide, because all this affect the crop and thereby reduce food production. Now, the fifth content here point is mechanization, and it involves using machineries. Might not always be possible on small piece of land, but it may be possible if neighboring farmers are cooperating and you decide to use machineries in order to improve crop production and reduce human labor. Then next, you look at selective breeding of animals and plants, look at genetically modified organisms, and look at controlled environments such as greenhouses and hydroponics. Hydroponics is the process of growing crop in the absence of soil. So you can actually grow crops within an enclosure of your house and within a small area. You don't really need a large piece of farmland to do that. Now, however, there are impacts of these agricultural practices on the environment and people. So, first, your syllabus expects you to know the impact of overuse of insecticides and herbicides. Insecticide is used to control insects, while herbicide is used to kill weeds or herbs that also affect the plant growth. So, number one, you find out that use of insecticide and herbicide lead to resistance in pest population, and it can lead to environmental damages, such as it can kill useful insects which aid in pollination, like bees. Now, there can be issue of spray drift. What it means is, when you have a piece of land and you spray insecticides or herbicide, and possibly there is rainfall, and the rainfall can actually wash it to another environment. So there can be issue of spray drift, where leaching can occur and the insecticide can be washed to a river and lead to death of aquatic plant and animal. And so there is also impact of overuse of fertilizers. How will impact of overuse of fertilizers affect the environment and people? Now, fertilizers lead to the process of eutrophication. Now, if excess fertilizers are drained into water bodies, it causes eutrophication. So shortly, we're also going to look at the process of eutrophication. Now, use of fertilizer changes the soil pH, can alter it, can make it to become more acidic, and it can make it to become alkaline. And obviously, that will affect the type of crop that is grown on that piece of land. It can lead to death of plant and animal in the case of eutrophication. Now, it leads to excessive growth in water bodies because of the additional nutrient, which reduces the oxygen availability in water. So, quickly, let's look at the process of eutrophication. Now, let's say you have a farm, there are farmlands here. Farmland is here. You have farmland. Now, you decide to extension of the land. You apply fertilizers, and there is heavy rainfall before the fertilizers is being absorbed by the roots of this plant. Now, what will now happen is the fertilizers will now be washed away through leaching, and they will now move into, these are the fertilizers now, into the water bodies. That means this water will now be very rich in nutrient, and algae that are found inside this water will now bloom. So algae bloom, they will now grow. So you see, Nutrients load up. Excessive nutrients for fertilizers are flushed from the land into rivers or lake by rainwater. That's the first step. Now, once that is done, you find out that enough nutrients is there now. So the nutrient will now help the plant to flourish. And this pollutant causes aquatic plant of algae and duckweed and other to grow very fast. Now that will now lead to algae bloom, and as a result, oxygen is depleted. Algae bloom prevents sunlight reaching other plant. The plant die, and oxygen in the water is reduced. So let me show you something from that diagram. What that simply signifies is, you see, as a result of this algae bloom, as a result of algae bloom, now you have sunlight here. That means this algae on the surface of the water will hinder sunlight from moving downwards. So aquatic plant in this case, let me just here, will not have access to sunlight. As a result, they will not be able to photosynthesize and they won't be able to make their own food. And this algae on the surface of the water also reduce oxygen penetration, and so there will be less oxygen within this area, and aquatic organisms like fishes will not have enough oxygen for respiratory activity. So most of them, both the plant unable to make their food and oxygen reduced, so the animal and the plant will also die. So what will now happen once they die? They decompose. So decomposition further depletes oxygen because the dead plant are broken down by bacteria decomposers, using up more oxygen that are found within the water. So this death and decomposition of plant and animal further reduce the amount of oxygen that are found or present in that particular water body. Now, this eventually lead to death of the ecosystem. Oxygen level reach a point where no life is possible. So fish and other organisms found within that water body will die out. Now, let's look at the impact of irrigation. Remember, irrigation is also a method that helps to speed up food production. So we've looked at the impact of insecticide and herbicide. We've looked at the impact of fertilizers. Now, irrigation. How does irrigation affect the environment? First, it leads to damage of soil structure and death of plant roots, loss of nutrients through leaching. Irrigation can lead to erosion, soil erosion. Remember, soil erosion simply means the movement or transport or the washing away of the topsoil from the in situ, which is the point where it is found, to another point. It can lead to soil salinization, that is, increase in salt content of the soil. Increase in salt content of the soil. Now, it can lead to water logging within that environment. Now, next, what are the causes? Soil erosion. Let's look at soil erosion. Now, causes of soil erosion is simple. Soil erosion is caused by water and is caused by wind also. Now, you see, where most students get confused, most students are confused between soil erosion and flooding. You see, flooding can cause soil erosion, but soil erosion cannot cause flooding because soil erosion has to do with the movement of soil itself. So if the soil does not move, it's not been eroded. And anything that can help in the movement of this soil is agent that causes soil erosion. So in this case, water can help in movement of soil, and wind can also help in the movement of soil. Now, and however, why this soil is removed easily is when it is open and exposed to this water and wind. So you find out that here, causes of soil erosion has to do with removal of natural vegetation by overcultivation and overgrazing. So once there is overcultivation on a piece of land and also overgrazing using animals, it makes the soil to be exposed to either water and wind, which can now help to move it from one point to another, causing soil erosion. And this soil erosion have a lot of impact. One is loss of habitat. Now, remember we said soil is a medium for plant growth and it's also a medium or habitat for organisms. So you find out that once the soil is being eroded and moved from its point, from one point to another, that means habitat is being destroyed. And once habitat is destroyed, that means it can now also destroy slash destruct disrupt the what? The food web or food chain, food web or chain. And if their habitat is destroyed, it will now lead to loss of biodiversity. So the different species of organisms that are found within the soil will also decrease. I just added two more points. So loss of habitat, it can lead to desertification, it can lead to silting of rivers. What this means is once this soil are being transported, it is deposited somewhere. So if the depth of a river is this, let's say this is the bank and this is the bed of the river, bank and bed. So once soil is being eroded, they get to be deposited inside this river. So over time, they will now form layers upon layers, layers upon layers, layers upon layers. So you find out that this is called silting of the river. Earlier, the depth of the river was from this to this point, but because of this soil erosion, where most sand is now deposited, then the depth will now decrease from this point to this point. And once the depth is decreased, then this can easily lead to flooding because the river can now easily overflow its banks. Now, it can lead to displacement of people. And okay, I've explained this on the two. So, quickly, remember this is a quick fire revision. This topic on agriculture and the environment is really, really bulky. Let me be sincere with you. So, you can actually still look at my video on this same topic for recap because there I looked at the different types of irrigational methods and the advantage and disadvantage of this different irrigational method. Now, another impact of soil erosion is malnutrition and famine because if the soil is destroyed, if the soil is eroded, that means it's destroyed, it's no longer available. If it's eroded, what will happen? Food production will decrease. So food production decreases. If food production decreases, it can lead to malnutrition and also famine. Now, strategies to reduce soil erosion. These are different strategies to reduce soil erosion where um, still yet if you can still this is a quick revision, it's which you can make your note from, but if you want to understand in depth of these strategies, please you can watch the video on agriculture and the environment on my channel. It will help you to especially to differentiate between terracing and contour plowing. Now, so strategies to reduce soil erosion are terracing, contour plowing, bonds, we have wind breaks, maintaining this vegetation cover so that the soil will not be exposed, addition of organic matter to improve soil structure, and planting trees, mixed cropping, intercropping, and also crop rotation help in controlling soil erosion. So, sustainable agriculture, when you hear sustainability, it has to do with producing food, um, for this generation and also making sure that the soil and the component of the soil is present so that the future generation will be able to still use the same soil to produce food for themselves. So what are the strategies for this sustainable agriculture? It has to do with organic fertilizers. So instead of using synthetic fertilizers, it's better we use organic fertilizers such as crop residues and manures. Why? Because this does not lead to eutrophication because it's difficult for it to be transported by rain into large water bodies. Then manage grazing so the soil will not be exposed and be washed away by erosion. Now, crop rotation is very important. Use of pest resistant and drought resistant varieties of crops. So, if you have pest and drought resistant variety, then you don't have to use pesticide in your farm because the pest that is found will not be able to affect the crop because it's pest resistant. And also drought resistant will help you to cultivate even during period with low rainfall. Then trickle drip irrigation. There are different methods of irrigation, but the best that should be practiced is trickle drip irrigational system. It's quite really sustainable. And in order for water availability, instead of building dams and destroying river courses that also have its impact, we can also carry out the process of rainwater harvesting. So if you harvest rainwater, what will happen also is that most of the water will not just flow and, on the earth surface and remove the soil that is needed actually for the same plant growth. So thank you for your time. The next quick revision we're going to look at is water and its management. So have a nice day and please subscribe.